Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a massive, literal life or death clash over religious freedom in 17th century America. We're going back to a time when your personal beliefs weren't just, your own private business. They were a matter of strict public order, community survival, and ultimately the spark that forged this wildly revolutionary idea of absolute religious liberty. Listen to these beautiful, almost poetic words. They were written by a man named William Ledra to his wife. Hearing a message like that, you'd probably picture someone sitting completely at peace in a quiet garden, right? But the reality is actually incredibly dark. Ledra wrote that letter on the exact morning he was pulled out of a jail cell to be executed. He was the very last of 4 Quakers to be hanged right on the Boston Common. So, that leaves us with a pretty shocking historical mystery. Why in the world would Puritan Christians, people who literally crossed an entire ocean just to find a safe place to practice their own faith, execute 4 completely peaceful Quakers? What was it about this group that terrified the Puritans so much that they felt hanging them was the only way to save their society? Section 1. George Fox's Inner Light. To really wrap our heads around this, we've got to rewind a bit and head across the Atlantic to England in the 1640s. Enter George Fox. Fox was a deeply, deeply frustrated guy. He was furious that the state had total control over the church. He'd read the book of Acts, seeing all these early Christians filled with the Holy Spirit. But then he'd look around at the rigid Anglican church of his day and think, where is that energy? He went to all these fancy counselors and theologians, but nobody could give him any real answers. Finally, Fox had this profound, incredibly personal religious conversion. He experienced what he called the inner light of Christ. So by 1648, he basically says, I'm doing this myself. And he goes out preaching this radical message of a direct, unmediated connection with the divine. And let me tell you, this idea spread like absolute wildfire. Think about this staggering number, 100,000. By the year 1700, this totally grassroots movement, which literally just started with one frustrated guy preaching in the streets, exploded to 100,000 followers across England, Scotland, and Wales. And it caught on with everybody. We're talking wealthy aristocrats, like Judge and Margaret Fell at Swarthmore Hall, all the way down to the poorest servants working in those exact same mansions. Section 2, the Radical Quaker Beliefs. So, what was the secret sauce? What did these early followers actually believe that made them so incredibly popular, but also so dangerous to the folks in charge? Well, their views were off the charts radical for the time. First up, that inner light, meaning everyone, and I mean everyone, has direct access to the divine. That naturally led to this shocking, egalitarian mindset, where they even encouraged women to preach. No way, right? In the 1600s? They also valued pure simplicity over endless theological debates. They demanded total, absolute religious freedom, entirely rejecting state-run religion. They were absolute pacifists, 0 military participation. And remarkably, they formed the world's very first anti-slavery group. In fact, early Quakers like John Woolman used to go to people's houses for dinner, walk right past the hosts, and personally hand money to the enslaved people serving the meal, because he insisted they deserved to be paid for their labor. It was a total paradigm shift. Oh, and here's a fun little curveball for you. They never actually called themselves Quakers. They liked to go by the Children of the Light or the Society of Friends. In the early days, their worship wasn't just sitting in quiet, silent meditation like you might picture now. No, it was raucous, lots of singing, lots of dancing. One time, they were hauled in front of a judge who totally mocked them, laughing that they quaked during their services. But instead of getting offended, the movement just shrugged, took the insult as a badge of honor, and the name Quaker stuck. Section 3. Clash with the Puritans. All right, let's head back over to America and watch this turn into a massive, fatal collision in Boston. The Quakers, fueled by this intense missionary zeal, started showing up in Massachusetts, and the Puritan establishment was quite frankly having none of it. When you put their worldviews side by side, it's pretty obvious why things blew up. The Puritans were all about strict predestination, only an elect few get saved. They were huge on ordained ministers, strict sacraments, and a very rigid hierarchy. The Quakers, they tossed all of that right out the window. Inner light for everyone, no hierarchy, no formal sacraments, just simple, everyday, experiential faith. Now, we really need to put on our 17th century glasses here for a second to be fair to both sides. To a Puritan, a Quaker ignoring church structure wasn't just like a minor disagreement over coffee. It was heresy. And back then, heresy was viewed as a literal, physical threat to the very fabric of society. It was chaos. It was a direct attack on the fragile new world they had risked everything to build. The Puritans honestly, genuinely believed they were protecting the common good. They were just trying to hold their community together. So when these Quakers showed up and flat out refused to conform, the Puritans cranked up the punishments. They eventually decided that publicly executing folks like our guy William Ledra on the Boston Common would be the ultimate deterrent. But here's the crazy part. It failed completely. Actually, scratch that. It backfired. Just like how pickpockets in London used to supposedly rob the crowds that were busy watching the hanging of other pickpockets, the public hangings in Boston didn't scare the Quakers away at all. Their numbers just kept growing.
Section 4. Rhode Island's absolute freedom.
So, this escalating nightmare desperately needed an off-ramp. Tracing their actual journey, you see George Fox start preaching in 1648. Then, in 1656, the very first Quakers, two women missionaries, pull into Boston Harbor on a ship called the Swallow. The Puritans were so freaked out, they didn't even let them step off the boat. They just forced them right back out to sea. But the Quakers were persistent. They kept coming, and eventually they headed south to find a real safe haven in Rhode Island. It became such an amazing stronghold for them that George Fox himself braved the Atlantic crossing in 1672 just to visit them, which, as you can imagine, gave the whole movement a massive jolt of energy. Now, this is where it gets super fascinating. You might assume that Roger Williams, the guy who founded Rhode Island, was this big Quaker sympathizer who just loved their vibe. Nope. The truth is, Roger Williams utterly despised Quaker theology. He thought their whole inner light thing was completely wildly unsound. But, and this is absolutely crucial, he strictly, fundamentally refused to use the power of the government to punish anyone for what they believed. He had seen the absolute horrors of state-sponsored religious violence back in Europe and up in Boston, and he basically said, not here, not on my watch. See, Williams built his colony on his own reading of biblical principles, and he concluded you simply had to have a total, unbreachable wall between church and state. And he wasn't just offering toleration. Toleration is when the guys in charge just sort of roll their eyes and put up with you. No, Williams offered absolute religious freedom. In Rhode Island, you could be a strict Puritan, a radical Quaker, or nothing at all, and the government legally had zero say in the matter. It was revolutionary. And the proof is in the pudding, right? Just a few generations later, you look at a guy named Stephen Hopkins. Because Rhode Island gave the Quakers the space to just live and breathe freely, they thrived. Hopkins was a proud Quaker, and he got elected governor of Rhode Island 5 separate times. He even went on to become a founding father, signing the Declaration of Independence. Think about that. The exact same group of people who were being executed on the Boston Common were now literally helping to build a brand new nation. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought. The tragic clash between the Puritans and the Quakers is a loud, blaring warning about what happens when you mix state power with religious conformity. But that little Rhode Island sanctuary, it proved that a society doesn't just survive when it embraces total liberty of conscience, it actually thrives. So looking around at all the liberties we take for granted today, you really got to ask yourself, how much of our modern freedom is owed directly to that one isolated 17th century experiment? It's pretty wild to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.